For over 15 years, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsberg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show, presented by Play Now, the official sports betting partner of the Winnipeg Jets, starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. With Dave Manouk, with Ezra Ginsberg, I'm your host, Drew Mindell, here for the next couple of hours, getting you set for a Winnipeg Jets game day. It's always a special day when the Montreal Canadiens come to town. It makes it extra special when that game occurs on a Saturday night, and that's what we have in store for you tonight in downtown Winnipeg. It's going to be a gooder. It's going to be a greater. We're going to talk all about her over the next couple of hours. Gentlemen, great to see you on this Saturday morning.
Good to see you too, boys. Like, I'm fired up about the Habs being in town, but specifically number 92, Patrik Laine. I think it's going to be, I think he's going to get a pretty big ovation he's going to get a big ovation from the Winnipeg Jets crowd. And like you said, Drew, we just had a original 6 team in, and it went pretty well for the Jets, winning 8-1. So hopefully they can keep it going. And if there's one thing about the Montreal Canadiens, is that they have trouble keeping the puck out of their own net. Mm-hmm. So for a struggling Jets offense, and obviously, we'll get into it, the Montreal Canadiens, whether it's Sam Montembeault or Caden Primo in net, both of those guys have been having trouble stopping the puck this year. It should be there should be some goals happening tonight at Canada Life Center. That's for sure.
Yeah, you certainly would expect there to be some goals tonight from these two teams. Dave, it's sort of similar to last Saturday in that for the second straight Saturday, the Jets are playing against a team that just doesn't have any structure. I mean, that's, with all due respect to the Montreal Canadiens and Marty St. Louis and the job that he has done behind the bench there, he's not there as an X's and O's expert. He's not there, in his stint as Montreal Canadiens head coach to try and give them structure. That's not what he's best at. He's more of a raw sort of, this is how you become a professional hockey player. And that's why I think a lot of people are expecting Montreal at some point in time, whether or not it's this year or in the offseason, they're going to need to make a coaching change in order to bring somebody in to do more of the structure, to build them up to a team. Montreal's got some talented players. They have a lot of, high-end young talent there, and Patrik Laine as well, of course. He's not really young anymore. But for the Jets, it's a similar situation to last week. The Jets need to overwhelm Montreal with their structure, with their down-low play, with their just commitment to the small things that Montreal isn't quite adept at yet as they learn to, perform at the NHL level.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I actually think Montreal's similar to Chicago boys because, interestingly, their 5-on-5 isn't good, but their special teams are actually pretty good. They're both top 15. So their power play and penalty kill, similar to Chicago's, right? A little bit surprisingly, they have good special teams, but their 5-on-5 play isn't particularly good. So you're right, Drew. They've got nice pieces, but Marty St. Louis doesn't seem to be having it put together. And one of the things that Scott Arniel spoke about yesterday at the media availability, because he was asked, I think, by Kelly Moore of CJOB, that he said, well, what's the deal with, would you rather be playing on a team that just lost 9-2 or won 9-1? Because, of course, Montreal is going to be snarly. Kyle Connor, of course, when we talked to him, I'll get into the Patrik Laine thing in a second, but he said, well, we're going to be snarly too. And Kyle Connor's words were pretty strong. Let's put it this way. He didn't mince his words. I'll find them direct. I'll find the direct quote from Kyle Connor because, again, like I said, I thought, and he was a contributing factor, of course, but he said essentially that they were terrible. Oh, here. Kyle Connor called the game against Vegas unacceptable, probably one of the worst games we've had in here in a long time, said they were completely disconnected, spoke of the number of zone entries that the Knights had and how they control possession. Big focus of yesterday's practice as he was trying to offset that, because as good as they felt against the Boston Bruins, when you take a step up in weight class and you're now no longer punching as strongly as you had been on Thursday, well, that causes a team that thinks that they're a heavyweight to be like, well, maybe we're just a middleweight. We got to figure this out. So they had a good practice yesterday, something Scott O'Neill stressed they hadn't gotten a lot of, and they're hopefully, from their perspective, able to adjust and play defensively better than they had against the Vegas Golden Knights, and also to have some shots, because you can't go from like 80 shots on net, I think, not literally, but like something significant against the
shot attempts against Boston
versus almost nothing against the Vegas. So Montreal, I think, is going to get Winnipeg's best because they're not happy with how their game was on Thursday night.
Yeah, so two teams entering tonight's contest a little disappointed, a little bit, roughed up, a little bit punched in the nose. Obviously, the Jets getting punched in the nose is way different than the Canadians getting punched in the nose. The Jets still earned a point. The Jets are still atop the NHL in terms of points earned this year. Montreal, of course, one of the bottom feeders in the league. But that said, anytime there's wounded animals on the ice, you still have to be careful. You still have to be concerned. And the Jets are saying all the right thing. And we'll get deeper into the game, of course.
Is anybody else just picturing like a dead skunk or like a dead deer on the ice right now? It's not a very nice image, Drew.
A lot of carnage. A lot of carnage.
I mean, I hope there's no animals being hurt in the making of this show. Only usually when we eat dinner after the show are there animals being hurt. But, you talked about Kyle Connor's words there. And I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about sort of Kyle Connor, leader in the dressing room, because that's really what you're seeing from him this year, Ezzy, is that you're seeing a more vocal, a more prominent, a more leadership-driven version of Kyle Connor. And I, for one, love it. For the longest time, he's sort of been this quiet assassin who goes about getting his 30 goals, getting his 40 goals, getting his 30 assists, getting his 40 assists. But now he's one of those players who's pulling on that rope stronger and more publicly to drag the team, where they need to go. So that, from the Jets' perspective, I think is a great thing. It's been happening all year long, but his comments yesterday really did resonate with me in the sense that it reminded me that Kyle Connor is not content to let others step up and take the microphone and hog the microphone like I do. He wants to be the one who gets behind the mic and speaks loudly and speaks vocally and speaks the truth about this Winnipeg Jets team.
It's an interesting point that you bring up, right? Because Kyle Connor obviously has been a top player for the Jets for many years now. This is going on. How many years are we talking about now? 8 or 9 years with Kyle Connor being a top offensive player in the NHL. But you're right, Drew. There are things I think that you can point to this year that are different about Kyle Connor, whether it's some of his hustle back defensively, whether it's some of his comments in the media. I mean, obviously, guys, the game against the Bruins, Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele were terrific. And I think that's Drew a little bit of a change. I'm not saying that Kyle Connor hasn't been accountable in years past, but I think he's starting to vocalize it more. And I think that's what your point is. And I think the Jets are aware now that the season, the standings are completely wide open. And this is a year for the Jets to finally make some hay in the offseason. I think these guys, and this has been a theme, obviously, guys, early on this season, is that these guys know that there were some missed opportunities in previous years. And I think these guys are sick of losing in the first round of the playoffs. And I think, maybe that's why you're seeing these guys take one loss or two losses, maybe a little bit harder than they would in previous years. I think part of that is the 15-1 start, right? I think the Jets set their own bar for how well that they can play. But I think Connor's been fantastic. Obviously, it wasn't his best game against the Vegas Golden Knights, but I think overall he's been one of the more consistent players for the Jets, obviously along with Mark Scheifele, along with Gabe Vilardi. And I think part of it is, he's playing for Team USA at the Four Nations. So I think he's extra motivated knowing that he's going to be relied upon for Team USA come February, right? So I think, the issue for me is that line, I think their bad games have been a little bit too common as of late. And I think that, going from, how you play against LA versus how you play against, like, the game against Columbus was not a good game. I think that's something that, even though these guys have been very consistent, the top line has to be on every single night for the Jets. It's not just every second game or every third game or everything like that. So yeah, I mean, Kyle Connor's having a great year, and I think you are seeing more leadership out of him this year, Drew, to answer your question.
Yeah, I love to see that leadership, because I think Kyle Connor is I mean, obviously we know the impact that he has on this team, offensively. But it's funny, I was thinking in the lead up to the show, the PK for the Winnipeg Jets, of course, has been a big talking point as of late, Dave. And it struggles particularly since Dylan Sandberg went out of the lineup and how it's now in the bottom third of the NHL. And I was reading Murat Atesh in The Athletic, and he wrote a good piece about the Jets PK and some of the the pros and cons of the Winnipeg Jets over the past 30 games. And he mentioned the PK and how the players on the penalty kill for the Winnipeg Jets don't play with a ton of speed. And they're not the fastest on the PK, with the exception of Kupari and Kyle Connor. Now, they're not your first choices over the boards primarily when it comes to the Jets penalty kill, but it's interesting to note, as he does in the article, that when Connor and Kupari are on the ice, the Jets penalty kill appears to be at its most successful. Now, that's not something you would generally attribute with Kyle Connor, but it just goes to show that, the speed, it's no coincidence, the speed that Kupari and Connor play with are two of the fastest players on the Winnipeg Jets. I wonder if you're going to start to see maybe more of them in penalty killing situations, because right now, what the Jets have been doing, the structure that they've been setting up, they seem to be a quarter of a step slow. And as a result, when you're a quarter of a step slow on the penalty kill, that's really all it takes for the other team to be successful, Dave.
Yeah. And I think that, I think it's also in part because you're taxing your guys, right? Like the Lowry line is playing a lot of minutes. And as a result, those guys who are your PKers, right? Appleton, Lowry, you're using them a lot, and so you're asking a lot of these guys. So if you can get a guy like Kyle Connor to be successful in that role, one, it perhaps increases his defensive acumen, and two, you have a guy who is, who, as you said, is quick and can make those get there and be in the lanes and intercept those pucks. So yeah, as Murat wrote, and Murat actually made asked, I know people were talking, remember we were discussing the first Golden Knights goal, which tied the game, the pass from Logan Stanley to Kyle Connor.
Yeah.
And Scott Arniel had an interesting, Kyle Connor's answer was basically, it's a 5-man unit out there. And he's not wrong, right? Like if you think about it, the first line leading up to the goal hadn't played that particularly well in the defensive zone.
Right.
And then Logan Stanley, in my mind, and I had a disagreement with one of our media colleagues, I said he should have airmailed it out because the defenseman was pushing and he had a visual of that. And Kyle Connor handled it like a grenade, obviously. But what Scott Arniel said, which was interesting, is he said that Vegas's defense, as he isn't aggressive. So they weren't, while their forwards were aggressive, their D weren't pinching. But because they were pressing in the game, they did something they hadn't been doing throughout the course of the game. They changed up their structure and their D pinched hard, which is why Kyle Connor probably wasn't expecting it because they hadn't been doing it all game. So Vegas evolved, changed. And I know we're talking about PK.
The only problem, I think it was Keegan Colasar, though, wasn't a defenseman that pressured.
Oh, was it Keegan? Okay, I couldn't remember. But the point was that, like,
I thought it was Shea.
I thought it was
Theodore.
I thought it was.
I'm going to look back right now.
Okay, I thought it was.
Well, Colasar was there creating some havoc too.
Yeah, I thought. But anyways, the point I'm making is that just they changed up the way their structure was, and so Scott Arniel just said that the team that had been going they had 4 or 5 waves throughout the course of the game where that didn't happen. All of a sudden, Vegas changed things and they had to adjust to it, right? And so that's that idea, though, of adjustment and being able to adapt in game because you could recognize patterns are changing. Because if you stay structured, for example, if you're Vegas and you're not having success, well, you need to do something.
It was Shea Theodore. I was right.
Yeah, that's what
I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave now for the rest of the show. Good night, everybody. Thank you. I've done my job here.
Anyways, the point is, though, that again, it's about adaptability in game, right, boys? And I think that's what you're getting. That's what this team needs to be able to do. That, I think, is the overarching theme, is that, when you have a structure that's successful, like you did against Boston, you don't really need to be adaptable. But the truth is, even though you're up 1-0, let's be realistic, as we've talked about throughout the postgame show, you weren't really up 1-0, right? You didn't have possession of the puck. You weren't dominating by any stretch of the imagination. So the Jets need to be more adaptable. And I think, getting back to your point, Drew, is that's what Kyle Connor, as a vocal leader, and, I think Dean Chenoweth was asked about Kyle Connor, and I think it was Dean, or maybe it was Scott, I don't know. But anyways, one of the coaching staff, and they basically said, like, here's a guy now who never, to your point, was never a vocal guy. And now he speaks up. Doesn't speak up a lot, but when he speaks up, the team listens because he's got a big voice that guys respect. And part of that responsibility, Ezzy, is the fact that he's got to be, better responsibly, as does that entire line, because, one of the keys, the games don't get easier, right? The games are only going to get harder and more intense, especially once you get to the playoffs.
Yeah, no question about it. But I mean, to me, if as they're sitting here on the December the 14th, and the Jets, of course, are still first overall in the NHL in terms of points earned. So, I mean, those are all very good stats. We don't, they're a top team in this league, but the penalty kill continues to be of concern. And I think it's probably one of the chief concerns for this Winnipeg Jets team. And it's, I agree. It should be. And the problem is that, obviously you're not going to recreate a whole new penalty kill system at this point in the year. You just have to execute it better. And, again, they're going back to that article from Murat, which I thought was really insightful. And so if you haven't seen it, it's certainly available on The Athletic, subscription required. And it's also available on illegalcurve.com, linking to the article. And it talks about how the Jets give up too many shots on the PK from high danger areas, shots from the most dangerous areas of the ice, the low slot and all around the crease, which hasn't changed since last year. And so this is a continuing issue from last year. Last year, it was almost they were too passive and they sat back too much. And, we heard this year that it was going to be the power kill instead of the penalty kill. Not seeing enough of that power kill mentality. And now I don't know if that's a function of the personnel, if it's a function of the deployment, it's a function of the execution. But, that was, sort of music to the fans' ears in training camp, Ezzy, but we're not seeing enough of that right now, especially with the Jets defense without Dylan Samberg being largely undersized. They're not a big defense. Logan Stanley, it's tall. We know that. Don't need to rehash that any further. It's something the Jets need to figure out a way to keep those slot shots down on the penalty kill because they're so successful in doing that at 5-on-5.
The penalty kill's got to be better, but for me, the biggest issue is scoring goals on this team. And I think, I just want to bring up some numbers here from Sport Logic. I mean, these numbers should be shocking in terms of a team that's first place in the NHL right now. Slot shots, the Jets are 22nd in the league. Rush chances, the Jets are second last in the league. Cycle chances, the Jets are 27th in the league. Rebound chances, the Jets are third last in the league. And forecheck chances, the Jets are 22nd, right? So you're talking about all of these categories. The Jets are either in the bottom 5 or the bottom 10. And that's a bigger concern for me. Yes, Drew, I agree with you. The penalty kill has to be better, right? And it's not our job to figure out how the Jets penalty kill gets better. That's the Jets coaching staff's job. For me, it's how do you get your offense going here? Because with the exception of the Boston game, guys, let's not kid ourselves here. Going back to that road trip, the Jets were having trouble scoring goals, right? They lost 4-1 to Columbus, struggling to score goals. That game against St. Louis was ugly. They struggled to score against the Dallas Stars, right? So that to me is, if you're looking for the biggest issue with this team, I agree with you, Drew, that the penalty kill has definitely, let's say in the last, 10 to 15 games, maybe even longer than that, has started to struggle. And I think you're right. Obviously, you don't want to just put it on one player, but Dylan Samberg is an excellent penalty killer. And I think you're onto something there in terms of what they're able to do with a guy like Kyle Connor or a Rasmus Kupari. Putting those guys out there gives you the speed element and kind of a counter-attacking element. But I do think that, guys like Adam Lowry and Mason Appleton and, Morgan Barron, they can offer that too. Those guys aren't, you wouldn't call those guys slow players. But I think what you're saying, Drew, is you need to have a little bit more of an aggressive mindset or an aggressive strategy. But I again, this is just me here, but I think the Jets' bigger struggle is their even strength offense. Power play is fine. The Jets' power play is an excellent power play, one of the best in the NHL. But I think that when you're looking, or second best to New Jersey,
you're right. One of the best. You're right. But you're right. Sorry for
so that's no, it's all good, Drew. I'm looking at that. If I'm looking at the biggest difference between the Jets in their first 16 games when they went 15-1 versus their last 15 or so games, that is a concern to me that the offensive has dried up, and you're not seeing as much goals from the defense. You're not seeing as many goals from when was the last time Rasmus Kupari scored? When was the last time Nino Niederreiter scored? It's been a while, right?
Well, the offense is certainly, something that has dried up. Look, when you lose every game 4-1, as you were for that stretch of time, that tells you that the offense isn't clicking in the way that you want it to be. But that sort of seems to be what the Jets have gone through over the last couple of years since Rick Bowness was the head coach. So going back to when Rick Bowness came in, is there were sort of stretches of time where the offense for the Winnipeg Jets would dry up, Dave. And I think that's a little bit of the function of the Jets focusing on the defensive side of their commitment to defense, which has been so stellar for the last, almost 2 years, at sometimes costs you offensively. I mean, we know when the Jets are at their most dangerous, what it looks like offensively. We saw it against Boston, where that third period, the Jets just came at them in waves.
Yeah.
Conversely, against Vegas, we saw that the Jets couldn't touch the puck for the most part. I mean, that they were fortunate to get that game into overtime. Tonight against Montreal, that shouldn't be the issue. Montreal isn't very good. So the Jets should be able to get things going, but you're absolutely right, Ezzy. I think there's a justifiable concern based on some of those numbers that you just gave. A lot of people would point to the Jets PDO, which is, for usually for PDO, it always regresses to the mean.
What PDO is, Drew, so people know. We can't just
So PDO is a stat that combines shooting percentage and save percentage.
By the way, the save percentage is not something you have to be concerned of.
Well, I mean,
that's Connor Hellebuck's average. I think is like 913. So right. I don't think that's abnormal.
But basically, when you combine shooting percentage and save percentage, the mean, which most teams will eventually get to, is 1.000. The Winnipeg Jets are at 1.040. Now, a lot of people might be listening to that and saying, so what? That's so close. Yeah. What are you talking about? What's the difference? You're talking about, percentage points of percentage points, and that's justifiable and that's true. But it's, the numbers bear out that usually most teams will end up close to that 1.000. And a lot of people would say, well, the Jets are bound to regress offensively to get to that number because Connor Hellebuck the expectation is that he's going to always outperform on the save percentage side of things, but the shooting percentage for the Jets is going to come down as a result.
Yeah, I think, and again, for those who aren't super familiar with that stat, it's kind of an overall indicator of a team's performance. I would say that's really what it is. It's a stat that gives you a little bit more than just wins and losses. But I think the point that we're trying to make here is that the Jets start, I think, has masked some of the issues and some of their performance as of late, right? Like we keep saying, well, the Jets are 21-9-1. Yes, they are, but there have also been, I think, some games that it's not just one game here. It's not two games here. I go back to that game against the LA Kings where they were really dominated, but there have been some other stinky performances. Like, let's be honest here, guys. The Jets were lucky to get a point from that game, I think.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, what's luck? I mean, what I'm trying to say is I think they were fortunate to get into that overtime period. And obviously, guys, like the Dylan DeMello penalty has still left a sour taste in a lot of Jets fans' mouths in terms of just, the timing of that put the Jets down 3 men to Vegas's 5, obviously, right? But I think that's something that you're definitely concerned about here with the Jets going forward. At least I am. I mean, guys, maybe I'm wrong here. You can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the Jets offense is dried up. And again, take out the Boston game because the Boston game's an anomaly. So, I mean, it's not like the Jets score 8 goals every night, but that's a concern for me that the Jets are having trouble creating offense, period. Forget the PDO, forget the expected goals, forget all that crap. It's not crap. Obviously it's valuable. What I'm saying is, at the end of the day, you got to score goals and the offense is dried up for me.
I don't think there's any question. I mean, I think also Nikolai Ehlers' absence is being felt significantly as he in a number of those categories. I don't think there's any question. It shows you how impactful he is. People can say he's brittle, although it's funny that, he played 82 games last year. So, he did play the full season last year. I know he's had injury issues, but so have a lot of players, right?
Yeah.
And I just think that you can't remove, again, like I said, hockey isn't a team where a game, with the exception of probably Connor McDavid, where you have one guy out of your lineup and it kills things, right? Especially if you're an upper echelon team or a really good team, whatever you want to qualify. But the fact of the matter is that, you lose Dylan Samberg, your PK takes a hit. And in his case, literally takes a hit on the PK to knock him out, right, Ezzy? And then the other thing is Nikolai Ehlers. He's been gone since that Vegas game, which was it was a good game. It was a 1-1 game. It was a tie game in the third period. They lost, with that late goal with 9 minutes to go. But They could have had a better fate in that one. And I just think that, Nikolai Ehlers is a big driver on that second line. You can't question, to me, like, with all due respect to Cole Perfetti and Vlad Nemesnikov, you lose a guy like Nikolai Ehlers. That's a significant loss for your second line, which is, again, what we talked about there was a big expectation that they were going to be a scoring line, right? It can't just be like the first line scores, the third line chips in, and they're chipping in more than they did last year, and the second line just holds water, right? You needed that line to be a contributor. Now, Nikita Chibrikov is a contributor. He's got 2 goals in 2 games, but you needed more from Cole Perfetti. You need more from Vlad Nemestikov. You can't be a second line center and not contribute. So that, to me, is a big part of what you're talking about. And so when you lose Nikolai Ehlers for the last 2 weeks, that is going to be, and again, I'm not saying that the numbers weren't drying up before that, as they were. The Jets weren't scoring to the same degree, but teams very rarely do. You're not going to be consistently scoring, 3 to 5 goals for 82 games. So you're going to go through lulls. Teams are going to figure things out. And I think one of the overarching, I know we got to go to break. One of the overarching themes from Scott Arniel was they're finally practicing again, right? They've had 2 practices this week. They had 1 practice last week. So they're finally getting a chance. I know that folks will be like, oh, it's just practice. Well, when you want to adapt, you actually have to do it in practice. That's where you get a chance to implement changes to things that you're not happy with. And I think from Scott Arniel's perspective, the last 2 practices, especially like he said, we did some things in the Boston game, but there were things that we needed to work on Wednesday that we did work on and that we hoped to bring into Thursday's game against Vegas. They didn't do it to the degree they needed to, obviously. So what did they do on Friday? He's right back there at the drawing board working on some changes to, drills in practice to offset the things that they didn't do well on Thursday night. So we'll see against Montreal if they can. And then, of course, next week against the California teams.
Yeah, it's not like the schedule's difficult to do, with all due respect. Montreal tonight, and then you go out to Anaheim and San Jose, or San Jose, Anaheim, whichever order it is. So the next 3 games are games that the Jets should be are the on paper very winnable games for the Winnipeg Jets.
Although, Drew, as Cal Connor pointed out, it's the Moms trip. Yeah. And they were 0 for 3 last year on the Moms trip. So there's a lot of pressure, as on the Moms this time around.
It's going to be different this year.
Yeah, they got to step up for the mums. You can't go.
Come on,
hear
moms.
about it from your mom if you keep losing in front of them. Those players don't want to hear that. That mum glare is always a hard one to receive. Jim Toth from CJOB 680 is up next. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, presented by Play Now, live on this Saturday morning. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mindell, Ezra Ginsburg, Dave Minuk's arm, and an empty chair join you this morning on the program. It's brought to you, of course, by our friends at Play Now. Learn to bet with Play Now, the official betting partner of the Winnipeg Jets. Sign up and get up to $250 in bonus bets. Conditions apply. 18 plus. Enjoy responsibly. Enjoy responsibly is the middle name of our next guest, Jim Toth from 680 CJOB.
Look at this baby face.
He gets younger by the day, doesn't he?
Gentlemen, how are we? Do you have me? Am I on?
You are on. We have you. We can hear you. You look great. The hat is on backwards. Everything is A-okay, Jimmy.
It's a Saturday morning. Hat's on backwards. Glasses are on. And I want to thank you for another generous Movember donation. I did shave on December 1st and lost 3 pounds, but I did it with the thanks to all of you and your generous donations once again. So thank you. I appreciate it. Great cause, and you're great guys. Good to be on with you.
Good to be, yes, our pleasure to donate to such a good cause and keep, we might give more money next year to see if the mustache can last longer than December the 1st. It's such a beauty. You want to keep that thing going all year round.
It might be time to I'm at that age where it's just mustache age. It's like, focus on that. Don't look at anywhere else in my body. Nothing else is attractive. So just keep the mustache, keep it going. And every year I do the old, December 1st, maybe I'll keep it. And then I'm told quickly, no. In fact, this year I was offered to stay in a hotel for the month of November. And I said, that's not nice.
It's the same thing my wife says, Jimmy. I sometimes, just for fun, I'll shave off the beard and just keep the handlebar. Yeah. And she'll look at me and says, you have about 48 hours. And that's about it. And you got back to, then you got to go back to looking like your normal self or start growing.
It's just too much man, Jimmy. That's what it's Drew's wife just can't handle it.
That's how I take it. That's how I take it. When I wake up and I hear the, I'm just like, it's too much testosterone right now. I understand. There's not enough room in the house.
Totally get it. Jimmy obviously brought you on talking about the Winnipeg Jets, still first overall in the NHL in terms of points. So that's a positive. But then you look at the most recent stretch of games and you're like, which Winnipeg Jets team is real? The one that was incredible. We knew that was obviously going to come back to earth, or this one, which has been sub 500. So we haven't had you on for a while. I mean, obviously the answer is likely somewhere in between the two. But if you had to pick one or the other, which one do you think is more real, the excellent or the below average?
Well, and I hate to ride the fence on this, but I think we'll find out at playoff time. I mean, I don't know one Winnipeg Jets fan that if this team went 81-0 and had one regular season game left, that they would care about the 82-0. They care about the playoffs, right, and getting it done. So, but I do think what you just said, Drew, it's somewhere in the middle. I think that they showed in that 15-1 run out of the gate that, when we all know the first 25, 30 games of the year are a lot different with teams in the last 25 to 30 games of the year. The hockey gets tougher, teams adjust, there's trades, teams get better. But they weren't going to go 82-0, and the struggles I see from them, I'm not surprised at. There's nothing here that I'm going, this is a major problem that was, sort of hidden in the 15-1 run. But I also don't think they're a sub 500 team. I'm a top 10 team in the National Hockey League again this year. And whether that's top, like last year in the West, top 2, last year overall, top 4, can they be top 5 in the West in the National Hockey League? Of course they can. I know we talk schedule every year. I know Paul Maurice, when he was here, used to love to talk schedule and lack of practice time. But I embrace that conversation this year because I literally had Dr. Jeff Leader on from the Pan Am Clinic on my own show, talking about what just time zone changes do to you. And what I will reiterate again is, because a lot of fans just don't want to hear that, and I get it, right? But what I will adhere to is Dylan DeMello. I've been around for a long time, and I've never been this tired, and I've never been this mentally drained after that 11 days and 6 trips or 6 games in 3 time zones. A medical doctor said this is how time zone changes affect you. What I do want to reiterate about the schedule is it's not like we think that, they're on chartered flights and hotels. It's who they're playing while they're doing this.
Right.
Like if you go into Los Angeles and they've had a day off and we're embarrassed 7-2 to San Jose, which is, I think, a 20-minute flight, and you're going into your 3rd time zone and you get 14 shots against the Kings, and you ask me what I saw from that. Are they a bad hockey team? I go, no, they look tired. They look this, they look that. Now, that being said, the real eye-opener to me, and it's ironic I'm on today, was Thursday against Vegas. What they did against Boston is what I think they're capable of. And I think that they can do that. And I think there's depth on this team that when the top line isn't firing like that, they should be providing more offense. I know you gentlemen were talking about depth offense and where it's gone. But Vegas was a different story, right? Because Vegas is – the reason I dislike Vegas, and they're annoying, is because they're so consistent at it. I still look at them and go, well, that's not a top 5 team in the National Hockey League, but they are. I still look at them and I see the names and the lineup and I go, okay, 1 or 2 guys, but they play a consistent brand of annoying hockey that's very, very good. And that's what I would look at the Jets and go, if I was to take in the sub 500 run, I would take a look at that game and go, okay, well, this was not good. This was unacceptable. But the rest of them, I'm like, we lost, or we didn't do this, or we only had 14 shots. And I'm like, the Vegas one is when I look at it and go, that's clearly what we need to get to, much better than that. And I didn't think they deserved a better fate. I know the penalties and all that, but to get a point out of that, I think they were kind of lucky to.
It's all those Western boys on Vegas. That's what it is, Dave. Shout out to Lethbridge, right?
It's got to be the Western Hockey League boys, right?
Absolutely.
The Jamie Pushers of the world and the ilk that comes out of that.
No, it's the Kelly McCrimmon School of Western League Hockey.
It's funny. I don't want to interrupt again, but I had him on after they won the Stanley Cup. Kelly came on. I've known him for years, and he was very great. He said, I'll come on anytime. Just send me a text and stuff. So maybe it's time to have him on again. But he said, I don't look for Western Hockey League guys, and I know that's the no. He goes, I look for pieces that will help us. He's like, when I went and got Jack Eichel, we needed a high-end, top-notch, bona fide superstar. He said, when I go get the Brett Howdens and the Keegan Kozar, those are what I need. That it doesn't matter. Like if there's a guy out of the OHL, he said I would do that too. And I take Kelly for his word. He's a pretty straight shooter, but then I'm also like, well, but the Western Hockey, like, right, and stuff. But so he wasn't adamant. He goes, whatever we need, I'll go get. And then I looked at some of the moves they made, and I'm like, he's right. There are a lot of Manitobans there, but they're playing roles that they fit into, right? It's not like he went and got too many Manitobans and they're trying to get a third liner up into the top
it's
six.
not Mike Smith drafting every Russian under the sun.
Exactly. Exactly. It's not like we went and got 4 more Western Hockey Leaguers and are trying to put them in the top 6 and make it work. He's right. He's gone and addressed what he feels they need, and they just happen to be Western Hockey League players.
Yeah.
Just wanted to get that in there.
Signing that 3-year contract extension yesterday. He gets $2.5 million a year for the next 3 years. Fits in very well in that role in Vegas.
That's the other thing they do well. Like Brent Howden, a 5-year deal at that price, and for him, or is it a 6-year deal? I think but the length of that. People might say, well, in 2 years he might make more money, and I'm like, yeah, but in 2 years he might be out of the league. He has a definite role. And if he prices himself out of it, I thought it's a great deal wasn't for the money. I'm just like, this Howden guy did he just solidified, he did the Brandon Tanev. He just solidified his career for the next 5 years. He's going to make more than enough money, but then he just guaranteed that in 2 years from now when his contract's up and the cap's tight or whatever it is, he just, he's in a fit where he plays his role. It's perfect for him and he's got longevity. It's a great deal.
He took the bird in the hand.
It's like the Adam Lowry deal, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Could Adam Lowry 2 years ago, signed a 2-year deal? Could Adam Lowry be, heading to free agency and somebody pay him $5 million? Do I think he's worth 5? That's a debate. No, not production wise, but he does everything else so well that he could go to another team and sign a 2-year deal and make more money. Or he is what he is. You're paying him well and he's got longevity. I do. Back in the 1290 days, we discussed this, and I said, I think this should become the Brandon Tanev, the Adam Lowry's, the new norm of the NHL. If you have a player and you know what you're going to get year in, year out, lock them up. Start giving them the 6-7 year deals. You know what you're going to. Does anybody think 3 years from now you don't know what you're going to get from Lowry or Howden?
Of course.
So start doing that for these guys. Brendan Tanev's the same thing, right? And
that's why they should have signed. A lot of people thought that they were going to sign Sandberg long term when instead they just bridged him. You sort of knew what you were going to get, and now he's going to cost you more money probably. As RFA this offseason.
Well, and Jim, I wanted to ask you.
Sorry, before I let you in, Jim, did you see my tweet earlier this week? I'm still getting 1290 emails. I'm still on the Bell Media email list.
No,
yeah,
no, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Wow.
All these years later, I'm still getting emails from Bell Media,
and they're all from Iraq, Jim, which is really weird.
well, maybe I'm getting them too, but I never read emails when the station was there. So, or at least Rack told me to. Can you start reading that email I sent you? I'm like, okay, sorry, Rack.
Sorry,
so, Jim. It's all good, Drew. I hope I'm not stealing Dave M's thunder, but I got to ask you about Nikita Chibrikov, and honestly, I think Chibrikov fits into that kind of player that the Jets might sign eventually to a longer term contract, right? Like, and I'm sure you have talked about him on Jets at Noon, and you guys have been talking about him quite a bit at CJOB. Like, I mean, this is just an incredible story because obviously Brad Lambert comes in for 4 games, doesn't get any points. He obviously showed flashes of that speed and skill, but Chibrikov 2 goals and 3 points already. Obviously, scored his first NHL goal last year. He's played most of the season with the Moose. But what have you seen out of him, Jim? Because it seems like he might stay beyond Ehlers coming back.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But the reason I lean towards that more than, say, Lambert came in and got 3 goals, 4 points in 3 games, and we'd be talking about if he's going to stay. I would say no, because Lambert's a top 6 guy. And I'm not trying to say Chibrikov isn't a top 6 guy. He is. But he could also do bottom 6 stuff. That's why they like him so much, is he's a top 6 talent that can do bottom 6 stuff. He's an all-round really good player. You didn't have to, all you have to do is listen to Arneil the other night when he's like, oh, I love watching him. Like, that's a little bit more than the usual. Yeah, he had a good game. He's doing well, like he and Arneil was like that, right? Arneil could put the puck in the net, but he also did the grindy, get in your face. He wasn't a goon or anything like that, but he was annoying to play against. And I like everything about Nikita Chibrikov. And I do think that he and Lambert are a big part of this future. But I could see him sticking around a little bit longer than maybe a Lambert, because he could go down in the bottom six. He could provide some offense there and do the job that bottom six players do. But yeah, I think he's going back down, guys. Like, I think we get excited about this. I know the fan base loves to see these young guys come in and get an opportunity. And I don't think Brad Lambert did anything bad either. I kind of thought this was what was going to happen. We had Lambert for a week, did great, go keep working, and he will be back this year. I believe that. And then Chibrikov the same. Let's have a look at him. It's maybe a time where under Maurice we wouldn't see this, right? Like, we would just fill in the guy who's a healthy scratch and go from there.
Like I've said, Jim, like the Patrice Cormier effect, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Bring that guy up, or the vet, right? Like, pick the NHL vet that's down with the Moose, bring him up, give him the opportunity, and let these guys develop. So, but look, it's exciting, right? I hope that when somebody says, what does Chibrikov stand for? He says goal scorer and walks away and just drops the stick and the mic and stuff like that. But that's the other thing about him is I don't think he's like that. Like, he's not that arrogant or anything like that. He's a pretty humble guy. And so, I mean, Dave would know a lot about him, much more than I would, but I like everything about him. I have for over 2 years. I like everything about Lambert too, but Lambert, I thought, didn't do anything wrong, but he didn't stand out. It was clear to me with Lambert, his future is so bright with this organization, but it's also clear why he didn't make the team out of the gate. Chibrikov is changing that conversation. I liked everything about him, and I think that, I understand why he didn't make the team at the start, but going forward, I think he's banking sometimes for maybe February, March, if there's more injuries and what they can do. But I do think he's going back down, and I think Ehlers comes back in, and that's how I look at these, both him and Lambert, that, are they taking anybody's place in the top six? I know we're going to get to Perfetti. Fair enough. Perfetti's got to start producing. Just plain and simple. But I don't think he's going to stick around. I do think he's going to go back when Nick Ehlers does. And I look at it that way. I mean, would you take Morgan Barron out of the lineup for him? I don't think so. Like, I mean, you're not going to change the third line. And if there's no room in the top six, you're not going to change the fourth. I mean, you have to look at the fourth line, and then there's not a guy in the fourth line.
And then obviously, Jim, you're not interested in having Chibrikov as your 13th forward. Like, that's just not.
No, that's
he's got to be at this point in his career. He's got to be playing games.
Yeah, and he had 13 points, I think, in down at the Moose. He wasn't lighting it up by any means. The Moose are going to have a rough season and are having a rough season, but playing time is what they need, right? And that's what I really like about the call-ups too, gentlemen, is they played top six roles. They didn't bring them in, and they didn't move Appleton up, and they didn't put somebody like, they just said, these are what you are, so we're going to play you where you are and go from there. But yeah, it's exciting, right? It's 3 goals. I mean, with Patrik Laine coming to town and everything that's going on, all eyes are going to be on Chibrikov. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Jim Toth from 680 CJOB, Jets at noon, host of the Jim Toth Show. He's our guest Saturday morning, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show presented by Play Now.
Jim, when Dylan Samberg blocked that shot and broke his foot and then still tried to get up and block another shot of Steven Stamkos's, he's obviously been out, and Scott O'Neill, I think in our media availability with him yesterday, said, he's still got a broken foot and he's not always walking with the boot, but it's got to heal 100%. So we're looking at the new year for Dylan Samberg. So he's out for at least another few weeks, and probably, sometime in the new year. Might not be, I wouldn't expect it to be right after. So from that perspective, we've seen the Jets have to step up with, Hayden Fleury and, the rotation of the third pairing. And from your perspective, because you have to, what I said to the guys, and what we've, not just me, but all of us have been saying for the last few days is, this is your opportunity, if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff, to see what you have from a defensive perspective, see how guys can step up, and then know that in April, when you can no longer make a trade, well, we know that player X stepped up and took on a bigger role than he was used to, and he was successful, or he was not successful. From your point of view, after watching this defensive group for the last few weeks without Samberg, do you anticipate that they're going to have to make another move to bring someone in, or do you think the defensive depth will be able to hold up in April if you lose a big piece?
I would make a move. I would bring somebody in. There's, the list came out yesterday. I don't know, or the day before, if it was daily face-off or stuff, but we're getting ready for the show, and I looked at this list, and I looked over at Cam, and I'm like, with this many available, you have to grab one of these guys. Like, it's not like there's 2, maybe 3 D-men that 20 teams right now would like. and then the bidding war gets too much. And then, I mean, there's the Marcus Peterson talk around Pittsburgh. I love. And I think what happens is you bring a guy like that in, pardon me, and maybe at the start you play him 5-6, but he's a top 4 guy. You put him in the top 4 and you move somebody like Neil Pionk down and you're just better. You know what I mean? Like I don't think it has to be, I traded for a top 4 guy and he's going to play top 4. I think it can be, we have top 4 guys and we're going to move one down, or we're going to bring one in and have them play 5-6, but we're going to make the 5-6 play more. And then even that out. I do think they make a move, and I think it's because they're that good. I think it's not like you're give something up. This is win now mode, and I know it's been like that for 2 or 3 years, but you cannot be a top 10 team in the National Hockey League and not do everything you have in your power every year to go and improve that. Now, you don't want to mortgage the future, but I think like Rasmus Anderson for I don't know how long. Like, I think adding that kind of defenseman in that is still $4.5 million into next year. That's a rental is even something I think they'll consider, which is against the norm. But if you could get a guy like that and bring them in and have another year of it and add that to the top 4. I've also, guys, been watching the cap a lot more than other years, because I'm of the belief like Niederreiter was signed in season and things like that. I don't think that's going to happen this year. I don't think if you sign Nick Ehlers, say, that spells the end of Neil Pionk and the other guys. I know the cap's going up, but that's a clear, direct message that we can't keep you. If you were to extend Neil Pionk right now, it's a clear message that Nick Ehlers isn't coming back. And I don't know if you want to do that to this change room this year. So it'll be real fascinating to me with the free agents that are sitting there, and if you get extensions. I mean, if you extend Dylan Samberg in a heartbeat, I think what we're seeing part of the sub 500 is how much they miss him. Yeah. But when you do that, and if it's at $6+ million, there's a couple guys on this roster that it's clearly like Alex Iafallo. You sign anybody for $4 or $5 million, and you have 2 more like Ehlers or Pionk sitting around. It's like Iafallo is clearly not coming back. I don't know. I don't know if you want to ruffle the room.
Not at that price, right, Jim? Like if he's making $2 million a year, then maybe. But
I can see that.
Not at $4 million.
I could see Iafallo coming back for $3 million on 3 years or 2 years or even less if the cap goes up if they want. But that'll be dictated in my mind by the conversations they've had with others. Like if an Iafallo signs a deal at a little less price but gets some term, then that tells me that they've had some conversations with maybe one of the bigger fish, and they're like, I'm going to wait till the summer. And then they're like, well, we're not going to wait on this kind of work. But so I do think they go hunting. I do think the number of defensemen that are out there that can help this team and whether they come in and play. I mean, it harkens back to the 2018 when you had, Trouba and Tyler Myers and Dustin Byfuglien. I mean, Tyler Myers, I know he's a lightning rod, but at the time when he's a 5'6" guy, when 20 other teams would have him in the top 4, that's what I think this team will be looking at doing.
Well, so to that extent, Jim, let me just sort of continue jumping off. Last year, we know that the big acquisition, in the lead up to the trade deadline, even if it wasn't that close to the trade deadline, was Monahan as the second line center. Do you think the philosophy has changed, that the Jets are now prioritizing a defensive acquisition as opposed to a top 6 center? Maybe they're happier, or they're willing to keep going with Vlad Namestnikov in that role moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, also the cost for Monahan wasn't as high. It was a first-round pick and another one. I mean, a first-round pick, I shouldn't say that's high, but it wasn't 3 or 4 assets. And I think if they could do that again with a second-line center, I think they would do it in a heartbeat. But I think the priority is adding to this defense core. I think, I like the defense core. Can it win a Stanley Cup? That's been a hotly debated topic on Jets at Noon. This defense isn't big enough, or this defense isn't fast enough, or things like that. I think that they're going to look for a top 4 D-man, and I think they're going to look heavy and hard. I think that's the priority right now. And again, not to maybe bump anybody, but to just add the depth of it, and not depth as in a healthy scratch depth in that we can move them down, or we can have top 4 D-men playing 5-6 roles. It just makes them way, way better. And I do believe that with the plethora of D-men they have, that one would be going out in the deal. Like, I think if you're going to go to talk to Pittsburgh and acquire Marcus, then I think you send a Stanley, or you send somebody else the other way with some picks or something.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same line of thought that you were on, Jim. I think that, clearly with the Dylan Sandberg injury, the depth has been tested on that left side. Even though, I mean, I'm sure you and Cameron have talked about it on Jets at Noon as well. Dylan Coughlin came in for that one game against Vegas and looked pretty good, right? So
Yeah, for a
Coughlin,
guy who hasn't played, he looked real good.
yeah, so he's only gone into one game, but it's showing that it's more so showing the depth on the second pair on the left side. Hayden Fleury at times, we saw it in overtime. I hate to pick on Hayden Fleury because I think he's done an admirable job, but I think it's just that idea of having more depth that you can rely on the left side, especially when you're moving Ville Heinola over to the right side. Because you want to have
moving him out of the lineup today altogether. So I mean,
sure.
You look at Thursday's game against Vegas. That's a tough team to play against. You have the Hayden Fleury turnover. You at some point in time you've benched Ville Heinola, and you have Logan Stanley turnovers. Being a factor in the game as well. Well, that's three of your defensemen in your top six that you've had significant concerns about in the course of one game against or what you'd like to believe are fellow Stanley Cup contenders. I think that sort of the tea leaves are evident at that point.
I think Dylan Coughlin's the Colin Miller of last year. They traded for him. He's not like, it's not Hayden Fleury. They didn't sign him and say, let's see where this can go. They see something in him that they spent a pick to acquire him. So I think he's the Colin Miller, right? I think he's the guy that at trade deadline time last year, they brought in Miller, and look at Miller's got a regular role, but I think they believe in him that much that he's going to be on this team. And that's why I think if they do make a move to get a defenseman, they'll probably ship out. Like, you're not going to sit here acquiring a D-man, send picks out, and then have Stanley, Heinola, Coughlin, Fleury, and Miller, and just all 5-6 guys looking for that 5-6 role as depth. You're going to move one of those guys out.
I will point out that a depth or a veteran defenseman was just traded. Cam Fowler has been traded from the Anaheim Ducks to the St. Louis Blues. It's Cam Fowler and a 4th-round pick to St. Louis for a 2nd-round pick and a minor league prospect. The Ducks are going to retain 38.5% of the contract. So, you're beginning to see. Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, and I heard they tried to dump Fowler for Trouba. Money for money, right? And the Rangers didn't want the money, and so now they're trying to get rid of Fowler. That's interesting, and it's interesting in St. Louis, right? Because St. Louis is acquiring all these pieces that basically are going. We're going to do it now for 2 years from now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, St. Louis isn't going anywhere in that.
But Fowler was another name, right? Like, there are so many top 4 D-men that could be available this year. I think the Jet, like I said to Cam the other day, I go, it's hard for the Jets not to grab one of them.
Well, and just not to name drop here, Jim, one of the guys that I've brought up to Dave before, I'm not sure if I've brought it up live on air, a guy like Mario.
And Ezzy and I don't speak off air, so he didn't bring it up to me at any point. So that
but like a guy like Mario Ferrero on San Jose, right? Like a left shot defenseman. He's not flashy. He's not going to give you a ton of offense, but as like an upgrade on your third pair, right? Like, so a guy like Mario Ferrero, a guy like Marcus Pettersson, like we've thrown out some names. If they could pry Rasmus Anderson out of Calgary for your top 4, that would be incredible. I'm not sure, you probably have to give up something a little bit more than, a mid-draft pick. But
the problem is, would Rasmus Anderson have to apologize to that Jets fan formally in Calgary that he glared at after they scored?
I love the stare. I think it's outstanding.
The best though was when the Jets won an OT and then he was there and she's like,
Yeah, that was the give it back to you. But I love the idea that, you're sitting in the sea of red and you have an Oilers or Jets jersey on and he looks right at you, the stare. But I also think that they love him in Calgary. And the thing with him is if he would want to stay. Like, I could see them re-signing him and making him a captain and all that if he wants to stay through this rebuild. But if he doesn't want to stay for the rebuild, I mean, at $4.5 million, I think you put that in the top 4 and oh man, I think you'd run it. But there's so many like Pettersson, Fowler. We could go on and on that. I don't think it would be, I don't think it's going to be that expensive when it comes to the end of it. And I think that they would be foolish not to when there's that many available.
Jim, I have to ask you, you mentioned it. So because you set me up, Cole Perfetti, 2 goals in 20 games, and both those goals came against Vegas a few weeks back. So, I mean, there's a lot of excitement. He had a really hot start, similar to last year, where he had a hot start. but 2 goals, 20 games, top 6 minutes, not enough from Cole Perfetti. What are you seeing from him, and what do you need to see from him to justify this? The amount of ice time he's getting.
Yeah, well, I still think he's getting his chances. I still think he's creating. I like the way he's getting back defensively and stuff. He's just not producing. What I don't like is the body language. I was hoping he would be at a better place. But it's hard for me to say, right? Like, I get it. He's a good guy. He wants to contribute. But he wears it so tough, right? Like he hits a post, or he has an opportunity and misses the net, and it's just the skyward, which we saw last year before the healthy scratching, right? And last year I got it. You're finally healthy, you're finally in it, you had a good run, and now you just can't find it, and it's frustrating. But I remember the interview he did on 680 CJOB after the last game of the regular season, and he said, well, it was a tough year. It was rough 15 games, not being dressed and stuff. But he goes, I'm going to take that as a learning thing to make sure it never happens again. And that's what kind of a quality of a guy he is. But I think, I don't know, like, is he trying too hard? Sometimes I think he is, because he wears it so hardly. And I wonder if a guy like Adam Lowry has any conversations with him that just goes, look, who cares if you're wearing it, what fans are seeing you throw your head up in the air, the weight of the world on your shoulders and stuff. I don't care what it looks like. I care about how it feels. And it's going to come. You got to simplify your game. Just relax. Because I haven't talked to Cole this year, but I just see the weight of the world on him the more these games go by, and I think that's to his detriment. We all know, and he's telling himself that when it happens, it's going to happen in bunches, and he'll get back at it. But it just feels like the waiting for it is tougher. Like he had those 2 goals in Vegas, right? And I thought, okay, he doesn't have to. And then against Dallas, I thought he was good. He didn't produce, but that's fine. I'm like, good, here we go. And then, I think it was Vegas Vegas. It was just, or Boston, the rolling of the eyes that, I'm not in a negative way, just in like, he's feeling it. And so I don't know what to say, Drew or Dave. I like his game. I think he's still producing. He's still getting chances. I like how he's still back checking and doing that kind of stuff. He just needs to find a couple and get his rhythm like he did in Vegas and get back to it. But that's the only thing when I say I don't like, it's not a negative. I don't want to see it from him ever or anything like that. I wish there was a little less weight on him about it.
Well, we like your game, Jim, and we still like how you produce here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, as well as on Jets at Noon and the Jim Toth Show. Jim Toth, 680 CJOB. You can hear him Monday to Friday. Thanks, Jimmy. Appreciate it. Great catching up with you as always.
Thank you, gentlemen. And before I go, I was watching earlier. I wanted to ask, as you got like that house in Sicario going at the start of that movie, what's going on back there? Like, there's nothing. I'm not gonna have to read a news story about your house on Monday, am I? Or?
Yeah. Just I moved in recently here in St. James, and there's no drywall. So yeah, I'm working on it, Jimmy. I'm working on it, but I just got a text from my friend who lives in Gimli, and he's like, "You got to do something about that drywall."
Lack thereof.
Yeah.
As a guy who had to fix our weeping tile this summer, I know all about that stuff, but it's just the plastic that frightens me. And the fact that I saw Sicario about a week ago again. I love that movie. And I'm like, what is Ez doing in St. James?
I'll be honest, Jim. I got to watch that movie. I was going to say, like, this would be like a great basement for like Dexter or, somebody like that. But
he's going to actually walk out in the GIMP mask from Pulp Fiction on the next episode of the show.
Cole Perfetti's not coming over. You're going to tell him how much he disappointed you right now.
No, never.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Cole's going to score tonight, Jim, I think.
Thank you, Jimmy. Be well, buddy.
Always a blast. Happy holidays to all of you and all your listeners and watchers as well. Have a great rest of the show, guys.
You as well. Jim. Thanks, Jimmy. Take care. Jim Toth from 680 CJOB joining us this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Always a great time to catch up with Jim. When we come back, more on the Winnipeg Jets, more on the Jets and the Montreal Canadiens. John Mattis from The Score is going to join us at the bottom of the hour as well. Don't go anywhere. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, not the postgame show. The Hockey Show presented by Play Now.
We want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling site instead.
Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
so much of your money.
Now, you might have questions like,
Do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Centre. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime, visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Centre. Holt Dental, the new official dentist of Illegal Curve, has a philosophy rooted in two unyielding principles: genuinely caring about patients and providing outstanding service. Being a patient of Holt Dental means more than just checkups and treatments. It's taking the time to listen and talk to each patient so they can achieve the best long-term health, functionality, and aesthetics for their teeth, mouth, and gums. Conveniently located at Grant Park Festival on Taylor Avenue, Holt Dental is dentistry of the highest quality in a comfortable and relaxed environment. For more information, visit holtdental.ca. Oh, and there's plenty of free parking at the front door, too. Celebrating its 40th year as Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best and most affordable live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For more information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I guess sort of the start of hour number 2, if it's not a few minutes after the start of hour number 2, but we're always happy to go along with our good friend Jim Toth. Always great to catch up with Jimmy. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, Saturday morning. We do this each and every Saturday. And then later on tonight, after the Jets and the Montreal Canadiens, right around 8:40, 8:45, give or take a couple minutes, it's going to be the Illegal Curve post-game show, talking about everything to do with tonight's Jets and Habs game. We look forward to having you join us later tonight for the post-game show. The Jets did not have a morning skate. They had a off-ice workout, is what the PR
Dryland
was. Yeah, dry land training, if you will. So there was no morning skate, so that's why we haven't given you any updates to that effect. But it appears as though the only lineup change that's going to occur is that Logan Stanley is going to be in the lineup on the left side of the third pair, and Colin Miller is going to be back on the right side of the third pairing of the Winnipeg Jets. Yet another example of how Logan Stanley seems to get more leash from Scott Arniel, from the coaching staff, from the organization than Ville Heinola does, something that I'm sure will be perplexing to many fans of the Winnipeg Jets. Frankly, it's a little perplexing to me as well. So I'll defer to you, gentlemen. Justify it for me. I know that we've sort of been talking about this ad nauseum over the last few weeks, ever since Dylan Samberg broke his foot in Nashville. But this one, to me, again, Heinola gets benched on Thursday for his poor play.
I was just going to say, Drew, that's why you shouldn't be that surprised that it's Logan Stanley and Colin Miller, just based on that fact alone.
Right.
His
But
recent
my
play,
point is, Stanley doesn't seem to have the same level of accountability isn't asked for from Logan Stanley as it is from Ville Heinola.
I think they prefer Logan Stanley right now. That's obvious, and it doesn't mean that it's right, but it's clear based on how they're using him, right, boys? I think that, and obviously it's the time of the show where you're to the next contestant on the third pairing defenseman, because we're talking about this for the third or fourth week in a row here. But I mean, Logan Stanley, I think, has played better. I mean, he was definitely the game against Boston, and it's easy to point to the game against Boston, guys, the 8-1 win. Everybody looked good in that game against Boston, right? So I think they're going to go with Stanley and Miller tonight. And, you could be right about that, Drew, in terms of, that the rope is a little bit longer, the leash, if you want to. I hate using that. It makes like we're reducing these guys to like they're animals, like dogs or something. But the reality is that Stanley is playing more right now. And, based on the numbers, based on the eye test, it seems like, Heinola should be in there, or at the very least, again, it goes back to this. Who do you see, to me at least, who do you see long-term on this? And by long-term, guys, I mean for the rest of the season. I don't mean long-term like 5 years from now, even though I think Heinola is a guy that you want to be around for that long or longer, right? I think it's who do you envision once Dylan Samberg comes back, who do you see as being that third pairing left side defenseman? Is it Hayden Fleury?
I think it has to be at this point.
Or is it
Hayden Fleury?
Well, obviously, no. Go ahead, Des. Finish your thought, and then I'll jump in.
Well, I was going to say, it seems like, again, if we're basing this on how they're deploying their lines and how these guys are playing now, then yeah, it would be Samberg goes back in on the second pair, and then Hayden Fleury gets bumped down. But at the beginning of the season, before Ville Heinola got injured, it looked like the third pair was finally his to seize, right? And that's the thing. I think that the ceiling is very high for Heinola, but we've seen him have trouble, with his zone exits, for example. We've seen him, get lost in coverage a little bit. But we've also seen that with Logan Stanley with the turnovers. And so to Drew's point, it's kind of like, how are they making this? This has been pointed out. It was pointed out by our buddy Garrett Hole on social media. Like, is it because Logan Stanley kills penalties? Is that what? Well, he struggles
not successfully for the record. I was like,
so again, I mean, yeah. If I've said this before, I think I said this last week. If it's based on who your best defensemen are right now, I think Ville Heinola is a better option than Logan Stanley. But again, like Drew said, they seem to be treating Ville Heinola with puppy gloves.
Dave?
The only thing I'm going to jump in here and say is that, look, Ville Heinola didn't have a good game against Vegas.
Yeah.
Now, the truth is, a lot of Jets didn't have good games against Vegas, which is the reason why Vegas dominated the game and the Jets were up, but really shouldn't have been. Josh Morrissey, the beautiful goal aside, right? Mm-hmm. But the thing is, quite frankly, is that I think, as someone answered your question, the reality is that I don't think Heinola or Stanley are in your top six when everybody is healthy. I think they go Miller and Fleury as your third pairing, and they go with, obviously they're trusting. It's not like they said, okay, Ville Heinola, you'll go up to second pairing, right? Like they put Hayden Fleury there for a reason. They didn't want Logan Stanley in the second pairing. So Hayden Fleury.
But I think, Dave, sorry to cut in here, but I think if you don't think that Ville Heinola at this point, with all you've seen from him with the Moose and all of you've seen from him in the NHL, if you don't trust him to be in your top six right now, then you got to acquire a top six defenseman.
But I think that's what they're going to, the truth is, again, and I don't even think the top six, like you need a top four defenseman. You can't top six. Yeah, no, but I'm saying and I know you know that, but I'm saying this Jets team, I think they need to anyways. I think that they need to make a shift. I think that they need to go and make a big swing, to be honest with you. I think you need a true top pairing defenseman alongside Josh Morrissey. I don't think Dylan DeMello is honestly, from what I've seen from Dylan DeMello this year, I just don't see it this year. He's taken a step, to me. He's just made a lot of errors that were not characteristic of Dylan DeMello's game the last few years. So I think Dylan DeMello alongside, I know that the numbers say that Dylan Samberg fixed Neil Pionk. Now he's reverted to a little bit more of chaotic Neil Pionk. But I'm saying that if you can shift DeMello down and have Samberg with DeMello and have Morrissey with a true, and again, I know that's a shoot for the fences, but you need to do something. I don't think we're going to look at this Jets team. And Ezzy, I know you mentioned the goal scoring.
Hold on, Dave. CMAC has figured it all out. He's gone deep on a trade proposal here.
What is it?
No, it's not real. Calgary doesn't want Neil Pionk. Come on, put that away. It doesn't make any sense from the get-go. What does Calgary want a UFA defenseman for? Let's not get carried away.
No. I know. I'm not saying that
if you're putting that stuff on the screen, I'm taking away your access to putting the comments up. Come on.
Hey, well, no. I like CMAC is he's using his brain here. He's trying to figure out a trade for us.
All right. Well, I mean, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with the folks engaging in putting their GM hats on and getting involved in that regard. But I'm just saying that from my perspective, if you look, Ezzy, you listed it off. Go through that Vegas defense.
Shea Theodore, Alex Pietrangelo, Noah Hannafin, Zach Whitecloud, Nick Hague, Braden McNabb. It's the best defense in the NHL as far as I'm concerned.
My point is that the Jets defense, with all due respect,
the Jets defense pales in comparison.
That's what I'm saying. So look, Vegas was a class above the Jets. I mean, and again, look, no Dylan Sandberg, no Nikolai Ehlers. I will acknowledge that. But at the end of the day, your defense is good. Like I'm not suggesting this is the worst defense in the NHL, right? I just think that they could use an upgrade, and that's Captain Obvious. But I've been saying that since the summer, that I thought if you could, like Elias Salamonson, who's injured right now, he's a very nice young prospect. His first season in North America, he's looked good, and he's a right shot guy. You don't want to block the right shot, but the reality is Neil Pionk's going to come off the books next year unless you sign him. And Colin Miller is obviously here for one more year after this, right? He's on the 2-year deal, right?
Signed a 2-year deal.
Yeah. So, but the reality is, if Colin Miller is your 7th defenseman, that's fine because he's kind of played that kind of bizarre role. Anyways, I'm just saying that I think this Jets team needs a true right shot, top pairing right shot guy alongside Josh Morrissey to shift Dylan DeMello. I think if you've got Dylan DeMello as your second pairing, I think you can win with that team. I don't know that you can with him as your top pairing right side guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Jets defense certainly right now would be, and I know we've talked about it, and I know, Ezzy, your concerns about the lack of offense are completely justifiable and make sense. But if I have to pick one area for the Winnipeg Jets to fix right now, it's the back end. Mm-hmm. I mean, you saw it against Vegas, and Vegas is a Stanley Cup caliber team. There's no doubt about that in my mind whatsoever. And the Jets, if that's the benchmark, and regular season games, there's no such thing, there's no measuring stick games anymore. The Jets have measured, they've been, that's all been done and everything else. But you just strictly look at the game that was played. Vegas was a class above the Winnipeg Jets on Thursday night. And so the Jets have to sit back, and it's Kevin Cheveldayoff's job. It's not necessarily Scott Arniel's job because he looks in the day-to-day aspect of the game, but Kevin Cheveldayoff has to sit back and say, how do I get my team? How do I build out this roster so that we are more competitive against a team like Vegas? Because we saw what Vegas did to us. We saw our weaknesses against Vegas on Thursday night. How do we fix that? And so for me, from my perspective, it starts on the back end. That's the area that first and foremost needs to be fixed because the Jets just didn't have any answers for what Vegas was doing to them. They couldn't get the puck out of their own zone. They couldn't possess the puck. So like every great team in this league is looking for a top 4 defenseman. The problem is you have to pay up for it. And, that's the question. Will the Winnipeg Jets end up paying up for that defenseman?
Yeah, I think they will. And again, it's not clear when that's going to happen because obviously, guys, we have, quite a few months before the trade deadline. But I still go back to what I said before about, the secondary offense, if you want to call it that, because Scheifele, Connor Vilardi, they've had varying degrees of success during this recent skid, but like it's hard, I think, to necessarily just pinpoint, one line because I think that, Chibrikov has fit in nicely since he was called up. Like he's providing offense on that second line with Nemesnikov and Perfetti. We talked about it. Perfetti 2 goals in 20 games. Nemesnikov, I think 1 goal in 11 or 12 games. Like that's your second line guys. That's a bigger concern for me going forward on this team. And again, I don't want to beat a dead horse here because obviously, Dave made the good point with Nikolai Ehlers out of the lineup. You see really who is driving that line offensively. And that's clear. Nikolai Ehlers doesn't just drive that line offensively. He has a big impact on the top power play. He drives the team offensively, right? Mm-hmm. So obviously what we've seen here, guys, is, 2 very important positional players for the Jets. And what happens, there's a snowball effect, right?
Yeah.
When Stamberg goes out, then not only are you asking Hayden Fleury to replace those minutes, right, Dave? Then you're asking, someone else to then step up on the third pair. And that to me is really, and again, I'll mention this again. I'm someone who wants to see all players on the Jets succeed, right? And what you're seeing is nobody's really taken the bull by the horns on the third pair. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing this rotation of Ville Heinola, Logan Stanley, Colin Miller. You saw Dylan Coghlan just for the one game. But I think that's what the Jets coaching staff was looking for. And Dave touched on this idea of, seeing, and it's kind of funny, right, guys? Because the Logan Stanley, Ville Heinola experiment, well, that didn't last very long, right?
Mm-hmm.
We thought that we were going to see a little bit more of that. And I've always said that Colin Miller should be your third pair right side defenseman. Like, that's just, he's played well enough. He's your best option there on the third pair. So now what you're seeing is Heinola and Stanley kind of seeing who can seize that left side role. But I got to see more from this team in terms of creating offense as a whole, right? Like, that includes Lowry, Niederreiter, Appleton. Like, those guys I think have been fine. We've always talked about, they're pretty consistent, but we've got to see more production. Like, we've got to see more goals from Iafallo, Kupari, Barron, especially if the second line is not going to be absolutely lighting it up, right? So the good news, boys, is Montreal is one of the worst defensive teams in the league.
Right.
So there should be an offensive explosion tonight, you think, based on just the matchup. And we haven't dived too deep into the Montreal lineup, but it's just not a very good team. That's
it's
just
not a
all
very
there is
good
to it.
defensive team. There's a lot of offensive upside, I think, on a lot of those players there.
But it's upside, Drew, that hasn't been realized, right? Like, to me, we always talk about this, right? It's like when you look at a team that's struggling, Dave, you can just like there's no shortage of guys that you can look at on this team, including Mr. First Overall Juraj Slafkovsky. He's got 3 goals. But you look at a guy like Kirby Dach, right? He hasn't taken that next step. You look at a guy like Alex Newhook on Montreal. I think he's got 5 or 6 goals, but no assists, right? He's playing, I believe, on the top line, right? Like, so there's Brendan Gallagher, he's a guy who's now
they moved Newhook to the second line now. He's with Line and Dach.
So Slafkovsky, Dach, and but that's why Line
and Caulfield are Suzuki and Caulfield are the drivers of this team among their forward group right now.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And has been for several years, and that's why I think Nick Suzuki. A lot of people were a little bit surprised he didn't make Team Canada. Again, we won't get into that. He's having a great year, but Suzuki and Caulfield have already established themselves as NHL players, and they're giving you point per game production, right? So it's not those guys that are the issue. It's that the depth around the team hasn't been very good, and then defensively, there's all sorts of problems. I haven't watched the Habs enough to know, who primarily has been underperforming. But from the looks of it, guys, it looks like there's no shortage of guys that haven't been playing well defensively for the Habs, right? Like, I know Mike Matheson on the back end is a bit of a whipping boy.
They're not a very good defense.
It's not a very good team.
Defense. Yeah, they're not a very good defense. So from the Jets' perspective, again, you have to go just like they did against Chicago last Saturday, a team that I think Montreal has better offensive talent than Chicago does, but the Jets have to go in there and they have to just beat up a bad defense. So you don't even let them show off their offensive chops, show off that offensive talent by keeping the puck 200 feet away in their own zone. And that's what the Jets did very effectively against the Chicago Blackhawks. And so that, speaks to the structure and everything else that we've talked about, and we don't need to rehash. But, you look at Montreal's defense and it's not up to snuff. Yeah. It's not up to par.
And one guy that Jets fans will like to keep an eye on is Lane Hudson. He's an incrable defenseman.
19 assists, 0 goals on the season.
Yeah, it's pretty weird, right, Drew?
Yeah.
But I mean, this guy's got all types of skill. Obviously, comes from, I think was he a Hobey Baker winner or finalist last year? I forget. Yeah. I think Macklin Celebrini won the Hobey Baker, didn't he? I forget, but I think he was a finalist for the Hobey Baker a couple of years ago. The point is, the guy's got all types of skill. So he's a guy on the back end, really offensively creative. But yeah, I mean, it's just not. I mean, again, we could go down the lineup. I mentioned Mike Matheson. Arbor Jekai, Caden Gooley is a young Caden Gooley is a big part of the future for the Habs. Sorry if I did that. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely a team that you can take advantage of offensively. That's for sure.
Yeah. So what you have to do is you have to make them defend. That's where the Jets are going to find their success in tonight's game. If it's a track meet, that's not the kind of game you want to play against the Montreal Canadiens, because they have players who can get into that track meet with you. So the Jets need to just make Montreal defend. And evidence has shown this year so far, Dave, that that's not something Montreal succeeds at. That's not something that they are adept at doing. That's an advantage to their opponent when you're forcing them to defend, like it is for most teams, to be frank. But Montreal is especially poor in that area. So the Jets need to get back to that. They need to play a majority of this game in the opponent's zone, which is something they did not do by any stretch against the Vegas Golden Knights on Thursday night.
Yeah, I mean Montreal's given up 109 goals. Like it's just a fact that they
Is that good?
It's not particularly good, as I would say. And although they've scored 80, which is not bad, but the fact of the matter is that if you're the Winnipeg Jets,
I think Cole Caulfield's got about 75 of those 80 goals.
Yeah, well, we know Lane Hudson has none of them, but he has 19 assists on those 80s. So, but I guess what I'm getting at, my point is that, you know, if you're the Winnipeg Jets, you need to come out quickly and fast and take over this game right away. There's going to be a lot of emotion. There's going to be a lot of Montreal fans in the building, whether Jets fans like it or not. It's going to be a sellout. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a great atmosphere. But the fact of the matter is, and there's going to be Patrick Laine. And what you could not do is take a penalty early and get a power play goal. You need to really just,
like you said, they've got good players on the power play. Caulfield,
power play is good.
Suzuki, Laine, Matheson is a good player. He quarterbacks the power play. So you're absolutely right, Dave. This is, I hate to say this, but this is kind of a little bit of a trap game.
Well, he was asked, Scott O'Neill was asked that about, there was a couple of guys from Montreal media yesterday in the media availability, and Scott O'Neill was asked, like, how do you prevent this from being a trap game? And he said, look, the truth is we're not worried about Montreal. We're focused on the Winnipeg Jets right now and what we need to do. And if we do what we need to do, then we'll have a good result. I'm paraphrasing.
And to the Jets' credit this year, they have done that against weaker competition.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, they haven't played down. They've managed to play their game, or a degree of their game, depending on their lineup, right, boys? And so I really don't can Montreal beat Winnipeg tonight? Of course they could. But would you expect them to? No, I don't. I expect Winnipeg, especially based on how unhappy they were, even getting a point in the last game, knowing that they need to get back on track, because they could have, as I said, they could have won that game. But we would have pointed to it and said, sure, you put 2 points in the standings bank, and that's great and all, but that's not a sustainable way. You can't play that way in a 7-game series and expect to win more than 1 game, maybe 2. So if you're the Winnipeg Jets, you were not happy with the effort on Thursday, regardless of the outcome and getting a point. And like I said, you were minutes away from having 2 points. So if you're the Winnipeg Jets, you have to come out, you have to play the right way as a collective group. All 4 lines have to be better. The defensive pairs have to be better. Connor Hellebuck was pretty good last game, so I'm not gonna malign him.
Yeah.
But
it's rare that we have to tell Helly that he has to play better.
Yeah, and so I just think that if what you do is you build that, because as Drew alluded to, this is not a particularly. You went from an extraordinarily tough schedule to one that sees you play, I think, 6 games over the next 2 weeks.
That's right,
or more actually. I think it's actually like 6 games over the next 16 days.
No, 6. It's 6 over the next 2 weeks. They play tonight against Montreal, then they go out west, Anaheim,
San Jose, and Anaheim.
Home to Minnesota,
and Toronto.
At Toronto on that weird Monday afternoon, a 1:00 game.
Yeah,
and then home to Ottawa 2 weeks.
That's at the end. Yeah,
I'm just curious, guys. When they go to California, do they fly over the Pacific or?
They have to. I think they go out over the Pacific and then they come back. Like they turn around to get to the landing spot
and to the front.
Yeah.
Dave texted me earlier this week. He's like, "I'm never going to live that down." I'm like, "You have no idea. This is going to provide months of content."
I'm just basically every show is just a prelude to finding out how we can bring that joke up at any given opportunity.
This will be like Drew's. This will be like Drew's little hop on the pool table from many years ago at a 1290. From a 1290 party.
That changed all of us.
Guys,
I'm still in therapy for that.
Yeah. Don't forget who you're dealing with. I know everything about everything. I can know everything about everything.
Like nobody's business.
Yeah. So I was going to say, if I really don't want that joke to still be made, I think I could bring out a few about you boys. So just be aware of who you're dealing with. That's a little warning, a little shot across the illegal curve bow, if you will.
John Mattis from The Score is set to join us next on the program. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, Saturday morning, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, presented by Play Now. Don't go anywhere. Bottom of the hour number 2, that is. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. The Jets and the Montreal Canadiens later on this evening, which means the post-game show, the Illegal Curve post-game show to be exact, will be on air right around the 8:45 time period. Be sure to schedule it, be back, and join us then to talk about everything that happens with the Jets and the Habs. From The Score, we're pleased to welcome back to the program our good friend John Mattis. John, good morning. Nice to see you. How are things? Happy holidays to you and yours.
Yeah, right back at you guys. Things are well. A little little cold here in Hamilton, Ontario, but I certainly can't be complaining given the audience and the folks that I'm talking to here. I would assume if we compared temperatures, you guys would be in worse shape. So
Yeah, John, I was
I'll
going to say,
I'll shut up about that.
Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's beautiful. It's like 25 degrees and sunny here in
It's actually going to be warm, John. It will be warm this weekend. We are, and to Winnipeg's credit, we didn't get winter till about 3 weeks ago. So it's been abnormal fall and early winter, and it was warm until about, I think, this week.
John, it was minus 40 with the wind chill 2 days ago. So just we get a little, like, we get some warm spells, but then usually it's followed by like minus 30 to minus 40. So,
but it's 0 tomorrow, John. So if you want to come to Winnipeg tomorrow, there's no hockey games tomorrow. But if you want to come here tomorrow, it'll be 0 degrees.
Yeah, maybe we'll come and go to Rumors Comedy Club. I didn't realize it was such a highly rated comedy club.
You're talking. Now you're talking. Tonight, Matthew Broussard at Rumors, 2 shows, 7:30, 9:45. Tickets available, rumorscomedyclub.com. John, I want to go back to an article you wrote for thescore.com earlier this week. I think it was a couple days ago. It was like a mailbag sort of article, and Nate asked, why the Jets, started off so well, given that they, on paper, got worse, from last year. And then you answered the question with, I think in general, I'm quoting here in the article, I think in general, we as fans and media underestimate the value of continuity. So maybe I want you to expand a little bit on that and your thought process about that. And maybe if we should be looking at continuity and or, conversely, the lack of continuity as a bigger hurdle or a bigger asset for teams to use to their advantage and or disadvantage as the season begins.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd say it's definitely like a hindsight is 2020 thing where I wouldn't necessarily say coming into the season, I go, Winnipeg's going to have a fantastic year because they lost players and didn't really replace them, right? Like it's just the nature of Winnipeg and free agency and how not much happens. So if they're going to change some bodies in and out in a positive way, it's usually at the trade deadline or drafting and developing. So kind of is what it is. And like I said, in hindsight, I go, what about the continuation here of this core? Is that something that we kind of underrate? It's not necessarily when we enter the season. So there's that. Like that's sort of a caveat there. But it is interesting, right? Because just the world we live in general. There's that shiny new thing we get excited about, and it's kind of boring to bring back the same old thing. And that's essentially what the Jets have done. But you got to give them credit because at the end of the day, what we have here is a team that is built around Connor Hellebuyck as far as the importance he has to their wins and losses, and also just the way that the roster and the system is sort of built around him in terms of favoring, the types of shots that he's going to save. I think that jumps off the page as far as that stability being a major plus. Literally 31 teams in the NHL would like to have Connor Hellebuyck. So to build around him makes a ton of sense. And then you've got a bunch of guys right in their prime. Like, I was actually amazed. I looked at their roster, average age of 28, and I hadn't realized that their oldest guy is 32. I think there's 3 of them that are 32. And, their youngest is early 20s. Like, it's very rare, especially in this sort of, it's not the flat cap era anymore, but we're sort of still in that sort of area where teams have to have some guys on entry-level contracts. Otherwise, they're just not going to make the books work. The Jets somehow are one of those teams that has a bunch of guys in the same age range, and that age range is the age range you want, which is their prime. So whether it's Scheifele or Morrissey or Pionk or whoever, go up and down the list. It's a lot of guys that are, right in their sweet spot. They're not learning the game anymore. They're totally, acclimated to Winnipeg in general as far as their system and just, life there, et cetera. So I think that factors into it too. And I don't know. It's just one of those things where if you have a core and you have, X amount of shots with that core, I feel like 1 year you're going to break through. This is kind of like the Carolina Hurricanes model. If you look at it, the Hurricanes have been playing the same way, have been, obviously bodies have moved in and out, but have had roughly the same core, Stahl, Svechnikov, a lot of those guys. And their whole, I guess, mantra is, hey, at some point, the way that we're playing, where we dominate teams and a lot of it happens in the regular season. We'd like to have more playoff success, but like what we're doing is working, and let's stick with these players we have that are very specialized to our system. And eventually we're going to break through. We're going to have that year where we go on a massive run. We end up in the Cup final. Maybe we win it. That's kind of a little bit of what I see with Winnipeg as far as like it really hitting this year. And obviously it helps to have an amazing power play. The 5-on-5 play, while not perfect, is solid. So there's just a lot there, but I think it comes back to a lot of familiarity amongst players. Obviously, Scott Arniel was already on the bench, so there, again, another familiar face. And sometimes it just works.
Absolutely. And, just getting away from the Jets here, I'm not sure. We might get back to the Jets. I'm sure we will, in fact, John. But I was texting with you this week and you were asking me, what we would talk about. And I was like, we got to talk about the Washington Capitals. Almost because, John, it doesn't seem like we talk about them enough here in Winnipeg. And obviously, different conference for us. Washington's, it's not like it's a team that necessarily has a rivalry with the Jets or anything like that. But, you look at the standings, obviously the Jets are in first place with 43 points, but the Capitals are right there with the Minnesota Wild in second. And to me, what's most impressive about the Capitals is they're doing this without Alex Ovechkin, who obviously was scoring at a pretty nice clip. Looked like he was right on pace to beat Wayne Gretzky's record, right? But, it's just such an amazing story. And I the question I was going to ask you is, do you think that the Capitals management got enough credit for the moves that they made in the offseason? Because obviously, the Pierre-Luc Dubois, that trade raised some eyebrows, right? Because it was not your traditional trade. It was for Darcy Kemper. And then obviously bringing in a guy like Andrew Mangiapane, bringing in Jacob Chychrun. Like, a lot of people looked at those moves and said, okay, well, maybe that'll get them, at least one win in the playoffs, because they were obviously swept in the first round. But you look at what Dylan Strome is doing and what Connor McMichael is doing, and how well Logan Thompson, 11-1, I think, in net. Like, a lot of people obviously have been very impressed with the way he's playing, but just overall, what's kind of your assessment of the Capitals and just the moves they made in the offseason to really revamp that roster?
Well, it's ironic you bring up the Capitals right after the Jets, because this is a team that had a ton of turnover, so it's almost the opposite. And if people listening think like we're sort of talking out of both sides of our mouth, I guess we are, but there's also multiple ways to build teams, and hockey's weird. And the thing with the Capitals that I find interesting is that you have to kind of go back to the 2023 trade deadline as sort of this inflection point where they realized, okay, like, we've got Ovechkin for whatever at that time, 3-4 more years. The goal chase is real. Our owner wants to keep winning while he's chasing Gretzky here. What do we do? And it was sort of that time where they started dumping, Lars Eller, who's back on the team, but he was one of the guys that left. There's 3-4 other guys at that deadline, and it was sort of like.
By the way, John, sorry, isn't this like the third or fourth time that they've acquired Lars Eller? It seems like every year they reacquire Lars Eller. It's like sometimes you want to just say, like, I didn't realize he even left.
Yeah, it's like David Perron, I think, was with the Blues 3 times or something like that. Yeah, it's just weird how that happens. But yeah, so there, it wasn't like an overnight thing, even though it kind of felt like it in the offseason. I think you have to go back to the 2023 deadline where they go, okay, we're going to try and thread the needle here. Yes, Ovechkin's a priority, but like the way that our roster is going, we need to make some changes. And before that, they hadn't made a ton of changes in a span of a few years. And if you compare them to the Pittsburgh Penguins, Crosby, Ovechkin, they've had a similar timelines in terms of these franchises. One team pulled the trigger pretty early on a retool. The other kind of waited too long, and now we see them going in different directions. And so from this offseason, I mean, I remember, I think it must have been July 2nd or whatever, being on a podcast, and we were just going through what the Capitals did. And, you got Pierre-Luc Dubois coming in. You've got Andrew Mangiapane coming in, Nick Roy on the back end, Jacob Chychrun on the back end. Like you said, Logan Thompson, like a lot of movement, and not, at pretty high profile positions on the roster. And I remember thinking on that podcast in July, like, I think they're improved, but there's so many what ifs. There's so many new bodies that, like, the chances of them all hit it, having strong first seasons is pretty low. And even if they do, I was thinking, yes, they're improved based on last year. They just made the playoffs and had this terrible goal differential. It was a very weird season for them. I was thinking, okay, they'll make the playoffs, but like, they're not going to be contending. Well, now here we are, right? And everything's gone not only well for every single player, but extremely well for the players that were there previously. You know, a Dylan Strome, Alexei Protas. It's really been one of those seasons where anything the Capitals touch, so to speak, turns into gold. And, you know, you got to give credit to Spencer Carberry. I don't know if you guys have seen some of the clips that he's blessed the world with, if you will, of those kind of post-game speeches and the player of the game handout. But, like, it seems like this team is completely rallying around its coach. And a bit of an odd season as far as, you know, if you looked at every prediction across the league, any market, I bet you people were high on them in the sense that, like, these guys could be interesting, but not a single person would have said, you know, they're going to challenge for the President's Trophy. It's kind of wild what they've been doing. And hey, you got to give them credit. Like, they made these changes. They were aggressive. I'm sure even internally they went, we'll see what happens. We're not quite sure what we have. And it's gone exceptionally well so far.
I think, John, it's the Hershey Bears effect. You know, the Hershey Bears just keep winning championship after championship. You have all that pressure.
Shout out to Winnipeg's Dylan McElrath.
Captain Dylan McElrath. That's a good point. But no, getting away from the Capitals, but staying in the East, I want to talk about a guy we're going to see tonight here in Winnipeg, because I think it's a feel-good story. We talked to the Kyle Connor, Mason Appleton yesterday, and they talked Scott Arniel as well. And while he doesn't want him to have any success tonight, the feel-good nature of seeing Patrik Laine healthy and producing and doing what he does again. How good is that for the league to have an elite player in a big market like Montreal doing what he's doing right now and getting that kind of that attention again?
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic, especially given all the context, right? Like, this guy was in the player assistance program. After he exited it and was sort of on his way back, him and his fiance, were speaking about, you know, the challenges and what they want to do for the community in that space. So, you know, immediately you start to root for this guy, and then he gets hurt right away in his Habs career, and that's, I mean, super unfortunate. And then he comes back and he scores a couple goals really early on, and the fans give him standing ovations, and it's like it's almost out of a movie script at this point in terms of the different chapters of this story already. But it's really quite interesting too, because he's, as much as Laine since the Jets days has fallen off and not been that score that we saw in his first two seasons, it's still there, that scoring touch. I mean, it hasn't left. It's not like he's 35 and has no hands left or something. So there is a reality. It's a small chance that he, you know, whether it's staying healthy, staying in the lineup, rounding out his game, there's still a chance that he becomes an impact player like every day and isn't just this guy who goes on, you know, 4 or 5 game streaks of scoring a bunch of goals. And within the, you know, the bubble of the Montreal Canadiens, I think that could be a nice find. I think, speaking of, you know, the Capitals, you know, taking some chances on guys, Montreal's been at the top of the list as far as, you know, acquiring the Alex Newhooks of the world, Kirby Dachs of the world, Patrik Laine, where it's like, we're rebuilding, but we're going to try to develop some guys in their 20s who have maybe hit a wall somewhere else. And we're going to try to fix them, rehabilitate them, and figure out if there's a spot for them as a veteran on this team that's growing. And I guess I just really appreciate that in terms of trying to do something that's thinking outside the box, as even though it seems very simple, hey, go acquire someone from another team and try to fix them. But, you know, there's a lot of lack of creativity in the NHL, if we're being honest. So I appreciate that aspect of it. But to circle back on Laine, I mean, feel good story at this point. And I hope it continues.
Yeah, no question about it. John, let me ask you this question. If you were an NHL general manager, and with the Four Nations tournament coming up, and we know how compressed the schedule has been and everything along those lines, would you rather have a player make the Four Nations tournament and be, you know, feel good about himself for getting to that level, or would you rather have a player who is right on the cusp of making it, but maybe as a snub and is using that as fuel for the remainder of the season? If you were a GM whose job is to win NHL games, be it in the regular season or the playoffs, which of the two would you rather have?
I mean, so I talked to an assistant GM about this, so I might as well just relay his thoughts. And he has a couple of players in the tournament, one that's going to get a ton of ice time. And he selfishly is like, I wish this tournament didn't exist. I love it, you know, when I put my fan hat on. But like, that player going out and having a good tournament has very minimal effect on the rest of his season and the playoff chase and what we want to do ultimately this season. Like, obviously it's good for the confidence if that player plays well, but if they're put through the ringer, I mean, that's just adding more miles. And these are going to be presumably, I guess we don't know till we see it, but presumably playoff like games. So there's that aspect of it. So, that assistant GM probably would have rather have, I didn't ask him, but probably would have rather have the snub. That's a little extra motivated. And it's tricky, right? Because speaking of the Capitals, I mean, they had 0 guys named to a Four Nations roster, yet are either at the top of the league right now in the standings or very close. And, I guess that speaks to maybe the surprise of their season and also their depth and everything. But hey, it might ultimately work in their favor. And who knows who gets injured? Like, someone's going to get injured at this thing. It's, if you look at just the probability of it, it's going to happen, right? You've got 7 games and guys playing with different teammates that they don't normally play with. The intensity will, as I said, presumably be pretty high. There'll be some weird things that happen. So yeah, I would rather have the snub, as weird as that is. And I'm sure there would be a conversation that you'd like to have with, say, a Mark Scheifele, if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff, where you're trying to build him up after he gets snubbed. But yeah, so because if Scheifele goes and he gets hurt, I mean, that's a disaster, right? So that's a pretty good example there.
And John, just sticking with the Four Nations tournament, because obviously we haven't had you on since the rosters were announced. And you mentioned Scheifele, and obviously that was very disappointing for him personally. Even though you look at the roster and you say, like, this is not an easy team to crack, like Nick Suzuki, who obviously we're going to see tonight for the Habs, but in the game between the Jets and the Habs. Nick Suzuki's another guy. He's a point per game right now, right? And he doesn't make the team. You mentioned Washington, Dylan Strome. He must have been on the radar for Team Canada. Logan Thompson, we talked about him. He's having a phenomenal season, and he doesn't make it. So I guess, how concerned are you, I guess, with the goaltending first and foremost for Team Canada? And overall, what are you looking forward to the most? Because I know there's, it's polarizing, this tournament, right? Because it's obviously only 4 countries, and a lot of people are looking at this and saying, like, this is going to be a nice little appetizer for the Olympics in Italy in 2026. But, before you answer, I'm still looking forward to seeing a best on best tournament, because we haven't seen it. So we haven't seen, Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid on the same team. So that alone, I'm excited to see.
Yeah, I mean, the bar is so low on our expectations with this, right? Like, 2016 World Cup of Hockey was the last time we saw something like this. Like, it's been way too long. So even if it's just sort of like a meh tournament, I think that the engagement will be really high, and I think we'll look back on it fondly. Yeah, Canadian goaltending, extremely concerning. I mean, Jordan Binnington, again, I'm just throwing some presumptions out there, but I would assume he's the starter at this point. Aiden Hill back up, and then Sam Montembeault as the third stringer. Montembeault gets 9 goals scored on him the other day. If you actually watch the game, most of it wasn't his fault, but nevertheless, not a great look. And I don't know, the Logan Thompson snub was tough as far as why, I understand taking Binnington and Hill, Cup winners, they've been starters for a while here. Like, when you have slim pickings, you want to hold on to something. But that third spot was open. It was there. There was 3 or 4 guys that had the opportunity and would have had Montembeault pretty far down the list. I don't know if this is a political thing where you've got Vegas's goalie coach is Canada's goalie coach, and Logan Thompson got traded from there recently. Is it one of those things? I don't know. Just purely speculating there, but maybe they want Montembeault to sort of have that look with the national team before the Olympics. If they see some upside in him, I can get on board with that. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I know you didn't ask about this, but the one snub out of any team, like, I think that most of them you can kind of justify, okay, this guy was left off because there's so many good players at his position. The one guy was Tage Thompson for me, where I go,
yeah,
how do you not find a spot for this guy? And it's not his fault that the Sabres have been a tire fire for, the last 13 years. Like, obviously it's his fault to a small extent, but like, he's done nothing wrong to not play any playoff games in his career. He hasn't had those big time moments, but if you watch the Sabres, he's their big time player in terms of scoring that goal to tie a game, scoring in overtime, whatever. and he's just such a unicorn. I think they overthought that in the U.S., say picking a Nelson over him or whoever.
16 goals in 24 games, just to back up your point, John.
Yeah, and he's he's pretty good defensively. Like if you compare him to Caulfield's pretty one-dimensional. I get that one. Okay, we have no spot for him in our top 6, but like you could have Tage Thompson on your fourth line. And I think he would be very useful, and he's fantastic on the power play. So if your original setup, around Matthews starts faltering, you throw Thompson in there and see what's going on. So that was the one where, again, like you can quibble with a bunch of these snubs and some of them are like legit arguments, but then you got to take someone out and you go, okay, I don't really see the argument for taking someone out. But I think Thompson was the one guy where I go, you're overthinking this, US.
John, we're at the point of the season where not just Jets fans, but a lot of fans across the league are already picking over the bones of some of these teams that are falling out of contention. And we know the Ducks and the Blues swung a trade earlier today, and the Jets fans are already looking at the Penguins to see who they can acquire to bolster this roster. From your perspective, like, is there a team that you think you thought would be in contention is falling out? Like I look at the Rangers and I don't even know what's going on with them, but is there a team that you think is going to be in that window of, look, they thought they could contend this year, they're going to have to start moving out some assets unexpectedly?
I mean, the Islanders kind of jump off the page to me as far as a team that's like right now they're a point out of the playoffs. They've played one more game than Philly, who's in the playoff spot, the last wild card in the East. But I see a very kind of bland team. I see a team that has a very low ceiling.
They've won 12 of the 31 games they've played.
Yeah, like I don't know. But again, like Lou Lamoriello has all these long-term contracts and he's very loyal to his guys. He's not quite the type to wheel and deal with the deadline, but he might feel the pressure if they are out. And that was a team that I think I circled as a wild card team in the East. So to follow your sort of rationale or structure there, the Islanders are one that, I mean, I guess it depends on your mileage on the Penguins coming in the season. But they certainly have fallen off to a pretty steep degree here. But the Islanders, like, speaking of the U.S. team, Brock Nelson, maybe there's someone else there on the blue line that's movable. So I think the Islanders jump out to me.
John, just quickly before we let you go here, I saw that you guys recently released a new show, Top Shelf, at the Score. I haven't caught the first one yet. I believe you guys have only done one or two, but just tell everybody about the new show, because I'm sure a lot of people will be interested to check it out.
Well, thanks, Izzy. Or Ezzy.
It doesn't matter what you call
John, you can call me whatever you want. It's all
is your full name Isabel? Yeah, sorry about that one.
It is now, let me tell you.
I play volleyball with an Izzy, so that's why it came to me. But yeah, Top Shelf, new show on the Score YouTube channel and also on Spotify and Apple. It's me and 3 other Score writers / content creators. It's basically a variety show. I mean, we touch on a bunch of different topics. We have a trivia section in there. There's a segment where I do some reporting or relay some of my reporting. So it's a bit different than your typical podcast in the hockey space. And we're in a nice studio. It's well produced. So I encourage people to check it out. And the first episode is online. Go to the Scores YouTube channel. And as a teaser, I absolutely destroy the other guys in trivia in the debut episode. So if you want to see some dominance in a very niche topic, because it is a pretty niche topic that we touched on in that trivia, you'll find it there.
John, I would have no idea what it's like to be in a nice studio because I don't even have drywall in my basement.
Exactly. One step at a time for you there, Izzy. John Mattis, our guest from thescore.com. John, thanks so much for joining us. Happy holidays again to you and yours. We'll catch up again real soon.
Thanks for having me on, guys. And have a good one, Izzy.
There he goes, John Mattis joining us.
John's
this is great. We
great
got all these new jokes that we can lean into. Dave flying over the Pacific, Ezzy now being Izzy, the drywall, the lack thereof.
Easy, Drew. Just remember, we know you. We've known you a lot of years. That's all I'm gonna say.
Dave's archives go back well over 20 years.
Yeah, I believe the phrase you're looking for, Dave, is mutually assured destruction.
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
Hopefully
Dave fights dirty. You don't want to. Dave's from the North End. You don't want to start messing around with Dave.
No, you don't want
to. We'll start with my hot dog Picasso of you, Drew. Just let's put it that way.
Oh man. For those who
No,
don't know,
you don't need to talk about it, Ezzy. It's
No, it's
behind
just,
the
you
scenes
leave it.
sort
It's a
of thing.
dangling. It's a dangling, Ezzy. We don't
You don't need to delve into it. You don't need to explain
The hot
everything. You
dog-
can just
the hot-
tantalize
just
people
hold
with
on,
it without
just a
talking
second, though.
about it.
the hot dog Picasso really did change me. That was a transformational moment.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Ezra. That's very good. I'm glad it changed you. The Jets hope to change their fortunes on the ice later on tonight when they face the Montreal Canadiens. That'll be a 6 o'clock shortly thereafter puck drop. I'm sure.
Oh, it
that
is
game
6 o'clock. Okay, because it's a Sportsnet game, right?
Yeah, it's either Sportsnet or I think it's on City or one of those, one of the Rogers communications
It's
channels.
going to be a busy night for Sean Reynolds.
Exactly. Rennie, I'm sure, will be on the broadcast as well. And then, of course, we'll have the Illegal Curve post-game show following that. Sort of interesting. Neither team took a morning skate, so not a lot of news coming out from the downtown arena so far this morning. We know, of course, that Ville Heinola is out of the lineup. Colin Miller is back in. Connor Hellebuck in net for the Jets. And I think we'll get some news about the Habs lineup coming up in about an hour's time or so, which I'm sure will be available as with all the latest Winnipeg Jets news available on illegalcurve.com this afternoon. We remind everyone the post-game show 8:45 be back here to the YouTube channel. If you haven't already done so, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and your job over the next let's say 8 hours or thereabouts is to tell friends and family that the best place to be after the game tonight, and again next Saturday morning, and the Saturday morning after that, and the Saturday morning after that, and the Saturday morning after that, is the Illegal Curve YouTube channel for all your latest Winnipeg Jets news, audio, analysis, insight, and jokes about Dave flying over the Pacific Ocean. Always.
Well, before you do, though, Drew, don't forget, it's not just the Jets that will be in action tonight. It's also a Moose game, so I'm not going to go into a Moose minute because there's nothing.
Put on your antlers. It's time for the Minuk Moose Minute on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
I'm taking away his access. I'm taking away his access. It's like I have to teach. It's like when I have to teach my children, there's ramifications for their actions. I'm going to take away his access.
Homer, don't eat that cake.
You know, Drew, just electrify the button. So when he presses something he shouldn't, all of a sudden he gets a zap. Anyways, the Moose are in action tonight against Abbotsford. So it's a late one. It's actually going to start at 9. So we'll be doing live Moose updates during tonight's post-game show, which I know everyone's very excited about. Of course.
Not the way they've been playing as of late.
No, that's true. And, you know, I want to
Need a dub.
Exactly. Frosty, I don't know if Danny Gilkin's in. He was in yellow when they were skating last week, but about a week ago, Mark Morrison said he was close, so we'll see. He could potentially be in the lineup. And quick prospect rundown, which I know as he loves. Kieran Walton, as he only had 2 points, but it was good enough to put him into 4th place in OHL scoring. And Kevin goal and 3 assists. He had a 4-point night. So
he good.
What's that? He good is right. And Jacob Julian had a nice little tip. Game-winning goal for that juggernaut London Knights. And Colby Barlow had an assist. His 5-game goal streak comes to an end, but he's got a 6-game point streak, which I think he has 5 goals or 6 goals and 3 assists or something like that. So he's picked it up, especially of late, especially after especially poor start to his season. Only had 3 points in his first 10 games, but he's come on of late. So the prospects were in action. And of course, Braden Yager, he was named to Team Canada's World Junior team. No surprise there, and he'll be playing in the World Juniors. And Dom DiVincentis, for my Joe from Winnipeg and my Italian friends, Dom DiVincentis 7-0 for the Norfolk Admirals. And my early season prediction, will he be on that Spengler Cup team? We'll find out in about 8 days.
There you go. Dave M with the latest on the Spengler Cup for some strange reason. That's it for this Saturday morning edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Big thanks to Jim Toth. Big thanks to John Mattis for joining us this morning on the program. The instant replay is immediately available on the YouTube channel. The podcast will be up shortly thereafter as well. We'll be back later tonight with the Illegal Curve post-game show right around that 8:45 time period. Big thanks to all the sponsors of Illegal Curve who make the Saturday show, the post-game show, the website a possibility. That's our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club. Play Now, they're the title sponsor of our programming. Holt Dental, Boston Pizza, City Place, and Seagram's support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. For Dave Minuk, for Ezra Ginsburg, thanks to all of you for joining us. I'm your host, Drew Mandel. If it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We'll see you later on for the post-game show.
Thanks for listening to this broadcast from Illegal Curve Hockey. For more great Illegal Curve content, subscribe to the Illegal Curve YouTube channel, follow at Illegal Curve on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and visit your online home for hockey in Winnipeg, illegalcurve.com.